Hi, Marcus.
Hey, Jerusalem, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
I am wonderful. I feel like it's been raining a bunch in Connecticut lately, so I feel like because the sun is now out, I feel less like a little mushroom, trying to thrive amidst all the moisture in the atmosphere. So I feel very good today.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent. Yes. Yes. It has been rainy. I've talked to lots of people because we've been like garden talking, and we've just all been talking about how in lots of places in the country it's just been wet and
yeah,
mushroomy.
yeah.
And it has been here too. But what I like about it is that it just means it's cooler a little bit longer here in Arkansas.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
I'll take the coolness because I know once the 100 degrees comes, it'll be here a while.
Yes,
So
it will.
yeah. So what's good in your world?
My good news is so for the very you and I have talked a lot about like the fact that I am like an aspiring gardener. I've wanted to garden, all those kinds of things. Well, at the beginning of this year, I just kind of like began the building blocks of like this garden, and I bought raised beds, and then I was like, well, I need to find a place for the raised beds, and I would buy all this stuff. Well, as of like 2 days ago, they are actually planted. Like all the things are in them, and it's so satisfying to see all of like the work that I've been like putting into this garden to like at least be at the beginning of like being something. So that's super exciting. And connected to that, my parish's garden ministry, they are super excited about Good News Gardens. Somebody in the parish got the email, and they cannot stop talking about it. And so they're very excited. So I'm excited about all, like, spring is now sprung and all the things are growing, including my own garden and the faith of my parish. It's just so great to watch it all happen.
I love that. Oh, that makes my heart happy. Yay, Good News Garden. That's so adorable. Well,
Yeah,
you are ahead of me because we don't have anything in the ground yet. Like,
really. Yeah.
but yeah, just because of the rain and just our spring has been kind of weird in lots of different ways anyway. And
Yeah.
so hopefully this next weekend, that's what we're going to do. But we did have 6, maybe 7. I haven't been able to actually count all of them yet. Baby chicks hatch yesterday and today. So like, yeah. Yeah. So I came, we have 3 chickens that have been sitting on eggs, 2 big chickens and 1 little chicken called bantam chickens. And the bantam chicken, bantams are pretty great at hatching eggs. So I went in yesterday after I got home, and because I'd been out, and I went in there and there were 3 empty shells. And so I was like, oh, and I could kind of see like one little beak peeking out because they get like under the mother. And so you can't see them. I mean, she's fierce, especially in the beginning until they're old enough to like eat and drink. And so then I went back out this morning to check, and there were 3 or 4. It was kind of, again, hard to tell because the egg cracks open, and sometimes you're like, well, is that 2 halves of one egg, or is that just the egg? So we either have 6 or 7 new baby chicks, and I think there's like 2 more eggs under her. So we'll see. We'll see.
New life all
life.
around. I love it.
New life all around. So that was one of my good things. And then the second good thing is that so this past whole year, one of the things I did kind of to keep me sane during COVID is I did a certificate program through Lexington Theological Seminary, a creation care certificate program. And was just an amazing experience, learned a lot. And the very last class, because I did like a class a month, the last class was about creation care preaching. And it was really cool because I literally got finished with that class and then got a text from a friend who has a church in St. Paul named Roots, the Roots community. And she said, we're doing a creation care series right now. Can you preach a sermon for us? And so like, I got to get out all my books and,
nice.
I was like doing real, I felt like I was doing like real scholarly work, and they're not Episcopalian, so I could go longer than 10 minutes. And so, so I did this ridiculously long sermon because it was kind of also like part history lesson, because I was also talking about Black farmers, and I've learned about that. So anyway, but it was really exciting to kind of put all of that good news together,
Nice.
that way. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also good to hear like how like seminaries are taking this work seriously too and creating programs to help people deepen their engagement in this really necessary work. So
yeah, and it was a fun program to go through because I was a little leery at first. I think if a lot of people are probably with creation care stuff, you think it's just kind of going to be like angry science and do you know what I mean? Like kind of cold and factual.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. Like there was so much richness. I mean, one of the things was like, who's your neighbor? Well, the air is your neighbor, the soil is your neighbor, the tree is your neighbor. So when God says love your neighbor, you're like, anyway, lots of like light bulb kinds of moments. And it was a beautiful, so I'm really grateful that, people are doing that work and they're taking creation care beyond just activism and policy, which it needs to be, but like they're making it incarnational. So yeah, it's really cool.
I love that. It's great.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, speaking of incarnational, we got some people on today, right?
Yeah, we have Rachel and Denise from Circle of the Beloved in Minneapolis. And I first met Rachel a couple of years ago, actually, when I was serving in Minneapolis. She had just come on board as the executive director of this wonderful Episcopal Service Corps community that was doing really cool work in the midst of like North Minneapolis and things of that nature. And so I wanted to sort of have a conversation with them and on this setting to think about, what has been happening during COVID and how this community really can have a word of wisdom to share with the wider church about what community looks like.
I love that. All right, let's bring them on.
Hello.
Hello there.
How are y'all?
We're good. How are you guys?
Doing good. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I've given you a little bit of an intro, but Denise and Rachel, if you all could tell us and tell all of our wonderful viewers, our millions around the world, who you are, what you do, and what Circle of the Beloved is.
Absolutely. Okay, well, my name is Denise Graber. I am a Northeast Texas native, and I've been in Minneapolis about 4 years now. And I am so incredibly blessed to be the director of Circle of the Beloved, which is the Episcopal Service Corps here in Minnesota. And so we have a house that holds 4 young adults that come and do a year of service with us, or 2 if we're lucky. They stay another year. That do service in and around the North Minneapolis area, helping our neighbors and our friends. Different organizations, building kinship across lines of difference. We strongly believe that we live in the community, we work with the community, not for them. And so then that's really that's a big deal for us because we don't need to come in and say, oh, look, here's your solution, or this is what you need. I think we pride ourselves in. I hope we do a really good job of listening to what they need, and so that how we can serve their needs. So that's a little bit of Circle of the Beloved. I'll turn it over to Rachel and let her introduce herself. She's one of our fellows and one of those that I've been lucky to have for 2 years.
Yes. Hello, I'm Rachel, a second-year member with the Circle of the Beloved, and it's really great. It's an absolutely wonderful community. We call ourselves an intentional community because we come in hoping that we are going to learn something from each other, that we don't have all the answers, that we are going to learn from our service and just from the world around us. And it's been a pretty interesting past couple of years, if I may say so myself. But it's been an amazing opportunity. And I really feel like I've learned so much just from being here for a year and a half.
Love that. Well, Rachel, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. And for those who maybe don't know a lot about intentional communities or why someone would choose to live in an intentional community, can you share why that was, we call this Tell Me Something Good. This is the name of the show because we're hoping we're telling people and listening and learning about good things in people's lives. So why was living in an intentional community a good move for you? Why was this good news in your life? And why'd you choose to go this route? Or how do you feel? Yeah. I mean, maybe you didn't choose. Maybe God just said, this is what you're doing. But what was that process? Why were those?
Well, I would say God put me here because I had just decided to move to Minnesota sometime after college. I'd done work for a year, and then I thought, you know what, I want to move to a place where I know no one and where I just want to like start fresh and see what I can do. And Circle of the Beloved kind of just came up. And I was a little wary because I thought, okay, I usually don't go to church organizations just because maybe my theology is a bit different, but then I found out it was part of the Episcopal Church, which is it's a denomination of the church that I've been in since birth, basically. So it felt like the right move. And so I came over here. Again, I didn't know anyone. I just talked to Denise over Zoom a couple of times, but everything fell into place. And yeah, it's an intentional community because we all want to be intentional about learning something about ourselves and from each other. So I'm living with 3 people that I'd never met before. And we all kind of have to get to know each other, and we all have to learn about, little quirks, what it means to live with someone. And one of my favorite parts is we all share what kind of service we're doing. We all share about like what we did each day. And at the end of the day, we all come home and say, okay, how are you? Are you doing okay? How can I support you? How can we all support each other?
And I think that bit of community and connection is always important. But I think you also alluded to something like it's been an interesting couple of years in Minneapolis, and I think like that's just putting it lightly. But I think it's also there's something about that even as we've been weathering. I mean, this show came about as a result, like Jerusalem said, because like we were in the midst of COVID, and we're like, good news. Where is it? Where can we highlight it? Where can we point to it? And then like smack dab in the middle of COVID, there's like George Floyd, right? Like this whole thing like erupts in our country. And there you are, like I know Minneapolis. So I know exactly, you say North Minneapolis, I know exactly what you're talking about. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the context of the past couple of years and where you have seen that good news bubble up, maybe even against all odds, where you've seen that the gospel or you've seen love or compassion kind of bubble up in your context.
Yeah, well, as you said, we're in North Minneapolis, which actually we are situated in Near North, which is a historically Black neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So last May when George Floyd was killed, it was a big deal. No matter where it was in our city. It was in the middle of everything. And I don't know if you heard, but there were a lot of different businesses burned down, like just a couple blocks away from us. So we had to kind of leave the house for a couple of days just while things calmed down, because there was rioting, there was looting. But when we came back, when we decided, okay, let's look at the damage, see what's happened, we actually saw a community that had refused to be broken and was slowly rebuilding like what little had been damaged. We got back and we saw food distribution sites. That was one of the things that we were just so amazed, and we immediately jumped in to help. But all the grocery stores had been shut down. So people from outside of, our little block radius just came in with food and water and, diapers and anything that you would need that you couldn't get here because of all the rioting. And it was just, it was awe-inspiring to see the community immediately swoop in to help each other. And there was a time at the end of the day where we were stockpiling things in the ECMN offices, and we had to turn people away because it's like, we have too much supplies. Everyone was just too willing to help that we had to just be like, you know what, that's enough for the day. Thank you so much. And that was, for me, that was really telling of what the community meant.
That's really amazing. Y'all really have been in a really interesting position over the past couple of years for sure. Denise, can you talk a little bit for those who aren't really sure about how this all works? Like, how does an intentional community like this even get established? And it's obvious that the people living in the house, the housemates, are, I don't know if they have a rule of life, but they have a way of being together. But how does your work support that? If someone out there is listening and it's like, oh, this is intriguing, right? I feel called to maybe start or establish or support this kind of work. Yeah. Can you just give a little background and info on all of that?
Sure. If anybody's intrigued, I think the first place that you need to go is to the Episcopal Service Corps webpage, because it has all of our information. We have 18 different Service Corps sites throughout the country. And so they're all independent. I mean, we all have the umbrella that we work under, and we all kind of have our guidelines, and we meet together and all. But what I do specifically at Circle of the Beloved is going to be different than what happens in Boston or California or Wyoming, etc. So although we're the same, we also have our own personalities. There's also a discernment quiz on the website too. So young adults can take a discernment quiz and say, is this something that sounds good to me? Do I like a large community, a small community? Do I want a rural setting, an urban setting, etc.? So all of that information is really important. And so once you take that discernment quiz, if you decide to fill out an application, Wendy Johnson, who she obviously, you guys know Wendy. She's our national program director through the presiding bishop's office. And so she'll send us the application. We interview them, they interview us. If we believe that candidate would be a good person for our program, and when I say a good person, I want to make sure that we clarify that, because we want to make sure that your gifts, for instance, match the service site that we have, and that the service site is going to challenge you and help you grow in the areas that you want to grow. So there's lots of different arenas that we kind of have to weave together to make sure that we think that you would be a good fit. Then you, as the young adult, get to say, you know what, Denise, I really feel called to go over here rather than with you guys, or I feel called that it would be an awesome opportunity for me to serve in Minneapolis. Everybody gets their crew together in the fall, or not the fall like July, August, September. We do initial retreats in order for the fellows to get to know one another, for us to get to know them. And we start our year, and here we go. And so they start serving. We start working on different programs for the fellows. For instance, one of the things that I enjoy doing is when we get together at the initial retreat, I want to know what they want to learn about for the year. Are they knee deep wanting to know more about the Gospels, or is there a certain book that they've really been intrigued about? Last year, for instance, we worked on boundaries, and what do healthy, honest Christian boundaries look like in the community versus in your personal world, in your vocation, etc. So all the different programs, again, get to kind of tailor this to their part of the country and to the fellows that they have coming in. That intentional community, Jerusalem, I think is so valid and so important for the growth, because as Rachel said, it is that I have no idea who you are and we're going to live together and we're going to like it. And it's not always going to be fabulous and roses, but I've been so impressed with these young adults, because the Service Corps does give them tools, or we give them tools. And that's part of my job, as you asked, how do you navigate this road? And then we kind of get to step back, and they get to do the work, and they get to be they get to get as much out of this as they want. And from a personal standpoint, it is absolutely amazing to watch these young adults grow. I mean, Rachel, I've told this before, but Rachel, I'm going to tell it again. She walked in, the day she walked in to the house, I was on the floor with the internet because it wasn't working. I couldn't figure it out. She had the deer in the headlights look. And that girl moved in, hit the ground. She got out in Minneapolis, figured everything out, goes and she learns and sees and grows. And she has become such an outspoken, just so sure in her bones, has taken the other fellows that came in the second year, for the first year and her second year, under her wing, showed them things. It's just delightful to watch what that community can do for one another.
So I'm reading through my spiritual director and I. She finally encouraged me to finish finish a book that I had been reading for like 7 years. And it's Joan Chittister's commentary on the Rule of Benedict. It's like a daily reading. And like, I started a couple years ago. I read like 2 days worth of it and then like put it down or whatever. But for whatever reason, now it's like really resonating in my own life. And one of the things that she says over and over and over again is the way that we are sanctified in community, right? The way that community, like this idea that like, I'm going to be holy by myself by going off and doing these like spiritual exercises off by myself is actually not what Christian spirituality is about. Maybe that's something else, but Christian spirituality says we actually come together. We are made holy together. We are made righteous together. It's that community bit of it that I think is sort of necessary. And then when I think about Benedict's context, like whenever Benedict created his first, when he created the rule, it was good news because the world was spinning apart into all these tribes and all these different political differences and all these different things. And this group of monks came together and decided we're going to live together. And so I see connections between Benedict's context and our own, where there's once again so much of spinning apart into this party or that party or this identity, that like all those things are like tearing us apart, tearing at the fabric of humanity. And yet what I hear both of you talking about is like when we choose, I like what you said actually, Denise, that there is a kinship across lines of difference, that when we choose to step across those lines and choose to be together, something amazing happens because of that choice, that we are actually strengthened. Something is brought out of us that otherwise wouldn't have been brought out of us because of that.
And I think one of the things, Marcus, that does is that puts, because Rachel's from the West Coast, I'm from Texas, we've got one from Florida, and we've got two that are from the Midwest. And so when in your world do those geographical locations come together for you to truly sit and learn from one another? And Rachel, they have this game. I'll let her explain it to you about how you say different things. But having that intentionality is so blasted important. So Rachel, you have to own the little game that you guys are doing.
Okay. One thing we learned this year is that we all pronounce things differently, and we all call different things by the regional names. So, for instance, carbonated drink, I call it soda. I think someone else calls it pop, but it's also different things about like, okay, what's this saying mean? And so it's just so much fun talking with everyone and thinking like, wait, what do you mean by that? What do you mean put it up? What does that mean? And it means put it away for those Northerners like me who don't know. But it's been so amazing just even having a conversation, hearing someone pronounce a different word that has just been like, I feel like I've been to all these places that they came from just because, I'm just hearing about these amazing experiences.
Yeah. And being curious about other people, I think it's such a needed gift. It's such a needed charism, being curious about somebody who's different, even if it's as little as like Coke versus pop versus soda, like that bit of curiosity can help us really see the other as this wonderful sacred mystery that they really are.
Yeah, I love that. So I moved all over as a kid. My family was originally from Little Rock, Arkansas, but my dad was a pastor and we moved all around. And I moved to Juneau, Alaska when I was 12. And I moved there from Clearwater, Florida. So like, I know.
That's like literally like the geographical opposite end of the country.
Yes, and it was a culture shock. And if you've never been to Southeast Alaska, it is a different culture altogether. Like it's its own thing, which was wonderful. But I can still remember 6th grade standing in the gymnasium, like lunch. We would standing in the gymnasium during lunch, and I said, "Fixin'." Like I'm fixing to go to back to class. And they were like, what? You're you fixed the car. Like, what are you talking about? And I can remember that so distinctly. And that was really I had heard different accents, right? But that was one of the first times that I really had this understanding, or it began to dawn on me, that we have very different ways of communicating and understanding. And I think that's one of the interesting things about our country and about our church. You know, as part of pre-COVID, part of my job meant that I traveled all over our church, right? And I have been places where the norm is a very fancy cocktail or champagne, right? Like champagne at the Easter Vigil. And then I have also been places where they served me milk for dinner. And I was like, I was just confused because the last time I had milk for dinner, I was in the single digits. And so, and I just thought, wow, like our church. And so having that perspective is really important, I think. And we forget when we look, especially what we've lived through the past year, and we don't understand how people can think differently. Or where their fear comes from, or where their anger comes from. And we are not as homogenous as we, I think, would like to think. We're not, it's very different. So Rachel, I would love to hear what you feel like you have learned, but maybe what your whole group has learned about difference that you think really speaks to what we've all been through the past year and moving forward. What have you learned about speaking across difference and the importance of that, the skills?
Well, difference is always going to be there, whether we like it or not. I think that was the first thing. But we've also had a lot of discussions in the house about like, okay, you believe this, why? Not in a confrontational way, not in like, oh, how could you believe that? But in like, okay, tell me about that. Tell me about the experiences that led you to have this belief. I'd like to understand. And that's really been it. Just like the fact that we all have to sit down and listen. We have to make sure that we're hearing that person's side of the story, because there have been times where my own mind has changed because I've heard like, oh, that's an interesting experience. I never thought about it that way. Now tell me more. I want to hear more. And I've also been in the opposite. It's like, well, this is what I've experienced in my own life. And this is why I have this opinion. And this is why this is very important to me, because of the things I've actually gone through and seen with my own eyes. And that has just been the biggest thing, is that even if that you're never going to have closure, maybe in some cases you will, but most of the time there's always going to be like, okay, we can agree to disagree, or I might start thinking about this in a different way. But in the end, as long as we're listening, that has made a difference. If you just sit down and listen to what someone is trying to tell you, that can completely change their outlook. It's like, oh, well, you're willing to listen to me, so I want to listen to you. And I accept that we are probably going to have differences of opinion on most things, but I also accept that that's not always a bad thing. I accept that I still have a lot to learn.
One of the passages of scripture that I think about through this whole conversation is when Jesus sends out like the 70 disciples and tells them, don't take anything, just go. One of the things that I hear in that is, by not taking anything and just going, you're really in the receptive mode. You are really standing to receive whatever people give you and to treasure it, right? And so as Jerusalem is going around the country drinking milk for dinner, which I think is just, it's just a lot. But I also think about like how wonderful it is to sit at someone's table and to be appreciative of whatever they give you. You know, to just say thank you and to really treasure, even if like you think milk for dinner is like, wow, that is what? Like, even if that's what you really think, in that moment to know that they're giving you what is important and valuable to them. And they're not telling you, now you go home and for the rest of your life drink milk for dinner, right? But like what they're telling you is, this is important and valuable for me. So in this moment, honor me by honoring what I think is important. And I think that little bit of like, you know, being with someone and for that moment, trying on their experience, trying on their perspective, even if you don't wear it out of the room, just being willing to sit in that and try it on, I think is something that I hear you saying, Rachel, is that you've sort of gotten from this experience. And that's so wonderful, because I think that is such a definition of like hospitality, of being welcoming. Like when we really say we welcome, it's not just you come look like me, but welcoming is, I accept you for who you really fully are. I will honor you for your fullness in the time that we are together.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Well, and Marcus, I think that's one of the things that that the Service Corps allows is it allows these young adults to have that experience and to, but also to have the time, because so many young adults, and I'm experiencing this in my personal world right now, are, you go from school to and you're on his schedule or her schedule or mom's schedule and dad's schedule and sports schedule, and then you go to college or you go to work, and then it's kind of like, okay, well, now nobody has the time to just stop. I think that's the beauty of a year or two with the Service Corps is these young adults have that opportunity to stop, get outside of their bones and serve somebody else, but also to have a program that really gives them some tools for their toolbox, and also some intentionality of, hey, Rachel, I see this. Let's sit and focus on this. Or with their check-in with the chaplain can say, hey, Rachel, what have you thought about this? And then so she can have time for prayer and discerning that. So just having that time of, Rachel, it's about you for a year or two. And then you have an entire community, leaders and fellows, to hold you up, to hold you accountable, and be able to send you on outside when you're done with strong boots.
Yeah.
So I love this, and I love intentional community so much. I love Episcopal Service Corps and all y'all do, and I especially love intentional community. I'm a little Benedictine at heart, so so I love all of this. And the thing that I'm kind of always wondering, and either one of y'all can answer this, is there's a lot of people out there who can't move into a new intentional community, but maybe they could see their family as an intentional community, or maybe part of their church experience. Like, what if churches saw each other as intentional community, right? And took those vows together? Like, what if an altar guild could see themselves as an intentional community, or a vestry? And how would that change things? So what are maybe just, what would you say are like the core things that if someone wanted to implement kind of this way of life wherever they are, what are some of the core practices, whether it's having that check-in or having that prayer, like Rachel, as you go into the world and you imagine what the rest of your life might look like, what are you going to take with you? And what would you maybe want to replicate to the best of your ability in future situations?
That question is a lot, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is just showing up. And that can look a little different for everybody. But the thing about an intentional community is that you have to be willing to make this commitment, is that you have to be willing to step up and sometimes be uncomfortable. You have to be able to just say, okay, this is not about me right now. This is about someone else, or just making it clear that this is something you want to commit to, because intentional community might not be for everyone all the time. And that's fine. There are a lot of times that I just want to, get in my room and shut the door and shut the world out. But it is really about just being willing to try something. And even if that means you're going to experience discomfort or some pain, or you're risking a lot, it means that you're making that step, because in the end, the payoff might be amazing. It might be that you make lifelong friends like I have. It might be that you learn something that you'd never heard before, but it's just really about making the commitment and pledging yourself to whatever happens, and I'm just going to roll with it.
And one of the things we always do and I think I can speak nationwide for this, is that we all put together, like you guys were talking a few minutes ago, a rule of life. And because everybody has to have a voice in that, in creating that rule of life. And so Jerusalem, like you were saying, oh my gosh, how fabulous would that be if all of our vestries and our altar guilds and youth groups and whatever, but everybody's got to have some skin in the game. And so if this is important to Rachel, that has to go in our rule of life. If Grant feels this, if Abby feels this. And so everybody gets to have that. This this means something to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that rule comes from. And then that's where I think Rachel was talking, where that respect comes from, and that I'm going to own this, but then I need to stop and allow you to own yours. And I just need to step back and not be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this conversation just because it speaks to me about the life-giving nature of community, which I think is especially a poignant part of our conversation because, you know, in many places in this country, COVID is on the retreat. Places are reopening, people are regathering, and, you know, everyone's asking, like, what is the next thing? Like, what's happening? What is the new normal? And my hope for a lot of communities is that, having spent a year in a time where sort of incarnate community was basically impossible, now that we're coming back together, I hope that we come and see each other very differently. I hope that we can sort of show up and commit to this, not in an onerous way, but commit to each other in a way that I think, at least what I've seen and experienced, it was very easy to sort of take community and take one another for granted before. I don't think I will see that in the same way now, seeing community in the same way. And so I hope that I can sort of take the lesson that you two have been talking about and learn from that and see community and show up in new ways. Because other people are valuable, and I can learn from everyone that I meet. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks y'all for being with us and sharing a little bit about your experience in Episcopal Service Corps and the lessons you've been learning this past year. Really, really grateful for y'all and your witness, and excited to just kind of follow along and see what keeps happening with the Circle of the Beloved. So.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Any final words or wisdom you want to share? Or?
The only thing I'll offer is, first of all, thank you guys so much for having us. This is so fun to visit with you guys. And also, I mean, if you're interested, if some people are interested, there's some places that are still accepting applications for the program year that will begin this fall. And so hop on over to the website and apply, or give us a call. I mean, I think all of the program directors are more than happy to visit, and just, we're here to serve them. We're just looking forward to it. It's a fun time.
That's great. We'll put all those links in the show notes. So
that'd be great. Good.
Yeah. So people can easily find you.
Okay.
Thank you so much again. Have a great rest of your week and be well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Oh, so fun.
Yeah. I mean, the question about like how our churches, vestries, whatever would change. And I mean, you all have been doing this a lot with like intentional small groups. It's just like saying, just by going that much deeper with our gathering, right? Just by being that much more purposeful and mindful about our gathering, it can involve so much more richness.
Yeah.
And so I just love that. I love that.
I've really been thinking recently, like, what if churches, instead of mission statements, wrote rule of life, right? What if they wrote a rule of life instead of a mission and a vision statement, and saw themselves more like an intentional community and less like a business, or even like a typical nonprofit? How would it change? And how would it, I need to go through, I know there's different things within the prayer book and the rubrics and things about like the baptismal service. There's some covenant work there, but I'm just curious if we made more intentional vows to each other, and maybe as people come back together this fall, especially, and some people are reopening now, but I definitely think this fall we'll see a pretty major surge in that, hopefully, and what if there was like a coming back together vow that people took? Like, how could that change how we experience Jesus and how we share Jesus in the world? And I
mean, I just think that whole idea of committing to one another, I think is just such a, I mean, as Rachel said it, I was just like, my God. I mean, if we as a country, right, could really commit to each other, I think the idea, I just think that there's been so much over the past couple of years that has like literally like tearing us apart.
Right.
And I think it is easy to just give into that energy, like to give into that force and just like go with the flow of things. And I think it's going to take people saying, no, I refuse to do that. I'm going to, just like they said, like, I'm going to build kinship across difference. I'm going to take the step in the opposite direction. And I'm going to intentionally commit to my neighbor. I'm going to intentionally commit to this relationship. That I think is the work of the gospel in this season, in very real ways. And I think our churches can be places where that can happen.
I totally agree. You know, we recently had, as of when we're recording this, I think this past Sunday, the gospel from John, where Jesus is talking about abide in me, right? And love your neighbor and lay down your life for your friend. None of that's accidental. Right. Like Jesus in that passage is asking for us to commit to him and to each other the way he is committed to us. I mean, I think that's the whole love as I have loved you, right? Which it's commitment and that I think that's going to be the only way forward. And if the church can offer something different from, you know, other nonprofits or organizations or movements, I think it's that ability to covenant with each other in the way that Jesus covenants with us, and to live that out. Because hopefully things are coming. I mean, at least in terms of COVID, things are better. But blessed, I have history major sons who will tell me that all the time that the 250-year mark of any government is when things go cattywampus. And so they're like, Mom, we're getting really close to everything going up, historically speaking. And so hopefully we're not in for anything horrid, but I just know you can feel it in the world, right? Things are still not 100% resolved. Right. And so whatever the next, 5-10 years looks like, if we can be a place that models that sort of commitment to each other, that holy curiosity that's not defensive, the listening across difference, And
I don't, not to belabor this, but what I just want to add is like what you're saying takes practice. Like it's not something that we get instantly. You have to try and fail a whole lot of times before you actually learn what holy curiosity is. And so not only that our churches be safe places where that can happen, but where we can cultivate that, right? Where we can try it on, and a safe place where we can fail and not be failed and that's it. You fail one time and you can never come back, but we can fail and try again, and we're held in the embrace of a loving community. Right. Yeah. That to me is good news. Like, when I think about a society where so often there's no room for failure at all. Right. I think a community that says we're going to walk with you, we're committing to you, we're committing to each other, and we're going to walk together. Even if we fail together, we're going to do it together, and we're going to keep walking together. Just like
that's revolutionary right there. Right. That we're not just going to write each other off and be like, well, forget it. Yeah. Then I'm done with you. And we're not talking about abuse here. We're just talking about like, right. My husband and I, and we've both been in therapy different times. We've been in therapy together. And there was one point in our marriage where we would just table things until we went to the therapist. Like we would start to get into it and then be like, nope, we're not even going to go there until we have that other party. Right. But I hope, like, what if the church could be the kind of place where, right? Like, okay, we're going to keep coming back to that table. We're going to keep coming back to that table. We're going to keep coming back to that table. Yeah. Because it's worth it. Yeah. We believe in this so much. Yeah. We believe in the love of Jesus and how that transforms lives so much that we're going to keep coming back. So
I have a colleague here in Connecticut, the Reverend Aaron Flynn, who's, I think, the priest in charge at like St. Stephen's, East Haddam or something, who calls that the 10,000 cups of coffee until we get it right. Yes. And ever since she said that, I was like, yep, that's it. Like that's 10,000 cups of coffee until we get it right.
Until we get it right. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
All right, Marcus. Well, I'm going to go have another cup of coffee on that note.
Speaking of.
Speaking of, work on getting some things right around here. But it was so good to see you.
You too.
And catch up with you. And hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.